Welcome to our webcast on writing advanced resumes. I'm Nicole Bulbrook from Western Alumni. We are incredibly grateful to spend this time with you, to take a little time away from all that's going on in the world and learn together. Before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. You will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout the session today. There is a Q&A feature on your screen. Please use that to ask your question. We have built in some time at the end to address as many as we can. We're joined today by our facilitator, Ross McPherson. Ross is president of Career Quest and has 20 years experience in advanced career strategies. He works with universities at all levels around the world. We're thrilled to have him today. Ross, over to you to get us started.
Terrific. Thanks so much and welcome everyone. So yes, we're going to spend the next 45, 50 minutes talking about some advanced resume strategies. So the whole idea is this is not resume 101. I'm assuming you understand where to put your name and some of the basics that go on a resume. What I want to do in the time we've got is I want to spend some time going through some more advanced strategies, how to take your resume up to the next level. So a few things before we even sort of jump right in, a couple things in terms of some ahead notes. The first one is I'm going to show some samples that illustrate the kind of strategies I'm going to be talking about. But what I want to make certain you understand is they're not templates. I'm not saying this is the only way. What I want to try to do is illustrate a strategy and then show you examples that demonstrate that strategy. But I could probably show you 50, 100 different ways. But I want to at least make certain you understand there's no such thing, and you might as well write this down as the first note. There is no such thing as a resume template that works well. I'm not a fan of them. I don't believe any one of you can fit into a template. It just doesn't work like that. So I'm going to show you how to build a resume that's designed to market you. Now, the whole idea behind this is we are trying to make you stand out in the resume, get the best possible results, the best possible traction. A resume that works, you could have all sorts of bells and whistles and fancy formatting and colors and, dancing bears and balloons. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, a successful resume gets your phone ringing. It gets interviews. Simple as that. What I want to do is walk you through some strategies that are going to put you above your competition and start making your phone ring off the hook. Now, I'll sort of start off with this idea. One of the mistakes, I see resumes all the time. I literally write them for a living. I write resumes for my clients, along with a whole bunch of other branding pieces, and I help them get their careers from point A to point B. That's what I do for a living. People send me their resumes all the time, the resumes that aren't working. Recruiters send me resumes that were, an otherwise good candidate, but the resume is so bad, the recruiter can't use it. So what I see more often than not is I see people who are either one, kind of underselling themselves, or two, what happens is the real kiss of death is the resume looks like a very generic person. So let's say, for example, it's an accountant. It looks like every accountant out there. It's a senior finance executive. It looks like every senior finance executive out there. What we're trying to do is build a resume that, one, really showcases what you're really good at, where your real value lies, and two, makes you stand out from the crowd. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. So this is actually, to give you an idea, let me move this. To give you an idea, this is what you look like to executive recruiters and decision makers. More often than not, this is what most resumes look like. A whole bunch of people. So let's say, for example, a company or a recruiter, they're looking for, a senior IT program manager. Pick that out of a hat. And they see a whole bunch of resumes. Here's what they get. A whole bunch of IT program managers that all look alike. What we're trying to do is make certain that, one, you appear at your absolute best, the very best version of you and what you can bring to the table, and two, that you stand out among this crowd. So that's what we're going to be trying to do. And I'm going to walk you through some of the real best, our highest ROI kind of strategies to do that. I will give you a little heads up. If you haven't noticed already, I'm going to talk very quickly. And the reason is, I would rather give you more quickly than less slowly. So this is usually, I'll be honest with you, I've done this in 3-hour workshops. So to hit it under 45, 50 minutes, I'm going to be picking up the pace a little bit. So fasten your seatbelts, let's dive right in. So a few things, obviously, as I said, we're trying to make you stand out from everyone else. This is not, again, just building a resume. We're trying to build your resume, your best resume. So advanced resumes are typically this. In today's job market, a good resume, I'll be honest with you, is not good enough. If we were sitting in like face to face, if that was even allowed in today's world, I would ask for a show of hands. How many of you think you have an amazing, fantastic, awesome, perfect resume right now? Ask for a show of hands. Then I would ask how many of you think your resume is pretty good? And usually I get the majority of the room with that. Then I'll even ask how many of you think it's terrible and you know it's terrible, and a good number are honest and put their hands up. The vast majority say their resume is good. The reality is a good resume is simply not good enough. Most resumes are okay. Okay, that's the problem. We don't want to find, I'm sure yours is okay. What we want to do is kick it up several notches. So you need a great resume. And here's what my definition quickly of what a great resume is. It's a focused and compelling marketing tool that clearly and succinctly markets your value to a specific role or a specific company. So if I break that down, one, it's focused. Let's say, for example, that I would assume if we've got, let's say we've got a few hundred people on this call right now, on this webinar, I would be willing to bet that there's a good number of you that could potentially, in a next career move your career in maybe two slightly different directions. If you try to go in two slightly different directions with one standard resume that you're sending to both audiences, chances are you're not going to get that, be that successful. You really need to focus it. So you need to focus one resume to that audience and that kind of role, and slightly alter it for that audience and that kind of role. So it really does need to be focused. You may be, and I do this for my clients all the time, you may be a perfect candidate for two slightly different versions of your resume, one for one audience and one for another. It's compelling. I would bet there's a number of people on this webinar as well who have done a lot of hiring yourself. You're the one who's gone through the resumes. How many of those resumes that you evaluated were compelling? You want it so well written and so well conceived and so concise and to the point that it's actually interesting to read. It's a compelling read. And that makes you a compelling candidate. That's what we're after. It's a marketing tool. It is not a history, and it is not an inventory, although those are parts of it. Ultimately, this is designed to market. And what's it marketing? It's marketing your value in a clear and succinct way. Ultimately, companies are not just hiring skills when they're looking to hire you. They're not just hiring experience. They're not just hiring education. All of those things may factor into it. But ultimately, what they're investing in, when they pay you a salary, they're investing in you. They're investing in your value to the company, and they want a return on that investment. That's why they're paying you. If they pay you $100,000, they want a return on that investment that is going to be worth that or more. So your job is to try to communicate and articulate in as direct a way as possible the kind of value you can bring to either the company or your department or your area or to your clients or your vendors or whoever it is you're working with or for. So that's what we're trying to do here today. Very quickly, and ultimately, here's the other thing you have to assume. You want a resume that's going to make you stand out from your toughest competition. The other assumption I want you to make, and this will give you an idea of how good your resume really needs to be. You have to assume the people who were applying for that job, if they're unqualified, don't worry. They're weeded out, they're eliminated, don't worry about them. You need to worry about standing out among those that are also qualified like you are. They're equally qualified. They have similar education, similar backgrounds, similar qualifications, similar skills, whatever it happens to be. You have to assume that there are people out there just as good as you. You want to stand out among the best out there, the absolute toughest competition you've got. That's what we're trying to do here. So here's the secret. I understand, and I'm willing to bet that most of you absolutely hate writing your resume. I'm not offended if you say that. I get it. Okay. And I understand that if you hate doing it, you're probably thinking structurally when you put it together. My name goes here, then I think this goes here. Someone told me, my aunt 10 years ago told me that I should put that there. And then I think I put that there. Then I list this here. And that's my resume. Boom. And you put it out and you hope that this is compelling enough to attract someone, to hire you for $100,000 or more job, $100,000 a year kind of salary. And it doesn't always work like that. If you think structurally, you're able to put something together, but we're trying to put something together a little bit better than that. So I want you to think strategically. And some of the things you need to ask yourself are, like any other marketing, who is your target market? You're not marketing your skills to the whole world. Don't try to. What are the kind of roles? Where do you add value? You need to kind of know that stuff. What's most important for them that you have for this role, right? What's most important to them? What are the qualifications, skills, experience, whatever that's most important to them? What do you have that matches that? And what's on top of that? What other additional competitive advantage might you have And I've never worked with a client that doesn't have something above and beyond that we can market. And then what's the most compelling way that you can present that? What's the most interesting, professional, polished way in which you can present all of that? This is thinking strategically. This is not just banging, here's what I've been doing the last 10 years on paper. This is much more strategic. Who's my audience? What do they want? What do I have that matches it? And how can I market that? That's what we're trying to do. So very quickly, I want to introduce this idea. There are such things out there as graphic resumes. Here's two examples. They're usually one page. They're colorful, they're beautiful, they're stylish, they're interesting, and there's all sorts of websites out there where you can just sort of give them information and it'll spit one of these out on the other end. Some of you may even, be able to do this on your own. These are beautiful, and I'm not knocking them. And I'm not saying if you've got one, they're useless. But here's a really important detail in case you're thinking that this is what you want. If you are handing this to someone, maybe even emailing it to a particular person and saying, here's a resume, here's a little, a really nice resume of my background and what I bring to the table, that might work for you. It's a really dynamic presentation. However, if you are applying online, if you are sending your resume, applying, cutting and pasting into a field, or if you're attaching it somewhere, uploading it somewhere, chances are there is a company on the other end or a recruiting firm on the other end that is using something called Applicant Tracking Software. So they receive the resumes, the software reads the resumes, orders them, plunks them, categorizes them, and in certain cases, and we'll talk about this later, even evaluates them and ranks them based on their match to the posting. It's the first cut. It just helps recruiters do their job. Doesn't have the final decision, but it helps them do their job and organize, say, 500 resumes that come through. Here's the problem. Those systems cannot read these. So you have this gorgeous, beautiful, colorful, stylish, graphic resume that the very company you want to work for, their system cannot read it. The other thing is these systems rank resumes based on content, based on the matching of the content. And if you look at these, there's very little words on here. So if your resume is like this and doesn't have enough content, there's no way it can possibly be a content match for what they're looking for. So these do have their place. And if you have one, by all means, it can be a great stylish intro, a nice little aside, a nice little follow-up, or here's another version of my resume, a more graphic one that tells a different story or tells my story in a different way. These can be great, but just don't use them when you try to apply online, because I guarantee you, you're not going to get a call back 99% of the time. So here's where we're going to go. We're going to jump right in. First off, what you want to try to do, you want to think about this as marketing. So if you eventually get to the point, or let's say, for example, you've got a 2-page resume, and I might as well answer this question right now. The question usually is, how long should the resume be? Here's my best answer for it. The best length in terms of 1 page, 2 pages, whatever is the best to sell you, to market you, go with that. I would rather see a really powerful 1-page resume than a drawn out, watered down 2-page. Or if 2 pages, if you just cannot fit the kind of content you want to say on 1 page, then you're probably a candidate for 2. If you are a senior executive, CEO, CFO, C-suite kind of executive of a major organization with a 25+ year experience behind you, there's a lot of recruiters out there who don't mind seeing 3 and 4 pages because they really need to evaluate your background. But those are rare. You should, I would say the vast majority, certainly if you've got a bit of a career behind you and you've held a number of roles at a number of different companies, you're probably a candidate for a 2-page. But here's the trick. If you're going to go into 2 pages, you got to fill 2 pages. There's no such thing as a really good quality 1.5-page resume. So it's either 1 page, and sometimes I should say this, sometimes it's industry specific. If you're looking to be in investment finance on Wall Street, they look for 1 page. They don't care how many years you've been working. They want 1 page only. So certain markets and industries are kind of driven by this. But other than that, what you really want to make certain you're doing is hitting that 1 or 2 page. I would say the majority of you with a bit of career behind you, you're probably looking at 2. So if that's the case, you want to grab them on page 1, and you want to grab them at the top of page 1. So here's what you want. There's something called the visual center of the page. It's where human beings look. We even do it on our laptops, on our computer screens. And the visual center of the page is kind of a quarter to about a third of the way down. That's where our eyes naturally fall. So our eyes don't fall in the middle of the page, and they don't even go at the top of the page. They go a little bit below the top of the page. So what I'm asking is, what do you have there in your resume? Is there anything there that's meant to grab their attention? And I'm going to show you what you could put there. So you want to take advantage of the visual center of the page. What you want to put there is a profile or a summary of some kind and a headline. And that's what I'm going to show you, I'm going to introduce you to. But there are ways of doing it really effectively and ways of not doing it so effectively. This is where I see people be really generic and really undersell themselves. You want to, in this profile section, throughout the resume, but I see it most in this little profile or summary section, try to avoid cliches, actually talk real language and what we call resume speak. So a phrase I see all the time, I still see it, is something like, you know, a strong team player with outstanding oral and written communication skills. Sound familiar? The reason it sounds familiar is it's a cliche. It's been said to death, you know, strong oral and written communication skills. And what kills me is that I see this cliche when people are talking about how great their communication skills are. If your skills are that good, you're not talking in cliches. I would rather you said, you know, strong communication skills and negotiation skills when dealing with suppliers, vendors, third-party strategic partners, and someone else. Like, actually say something. Or strong communication skills dash able to do this, do this, do this, and do this. Like, be specific. Actually talk to me. So don't talk in cliches, actually say something. Okay, that's what really makes, like, it's got to have some real meat to it. The other thing, throughout your resume, and especially in this section, I've seen profile and summary sections at the top of a resume that are about 3 inches. It's a paragraph about this big. I promise you, no one is reading that. I hate to say it, but no matter how brilliant and Shakespearean that giant paragraph is, no one is reading it. I would rather see you break that into bullet points or structure it in some other interesting visual way that is not intimidating for me to read. And those giant paragraphs anywhere in your resume are really not working for you. So here's what you want this profile to highlight for you. Remember I said what they're looking for that you have? That's what I call your most marketable qualifications, okay? You want to highlight those. I'm sure you have a whole ton, but you want to highlight the ones that are most important to them. What distinguishes you above and beyond your qualifications? What distinguishes you? What makes you unique? What do you bring to the table? So let's say, for example, I'm going to talk a little bit about those of you who want to make a career switch in a second. But let's say, for example, you are making a career switch. I always, when I'm working on a client's resume where they're making a career switch, I always find what it is from their previous career or the career you're in. What can you bring from that into this new career? And play that as a competitive advantage. You're moving from IT into finance, which is pretty serious. Well, then what is it that's required of you in the IT world that would be a distinct advantage in the finance world? What distinguishes? Maybe you've got an extra degree. Maybe you've got some additional certification. Maybe you've, like, here's another very common one. You've jumped industries all over the place. Now, some people see that as a bad thing. I always play that as a plus, is that your adaptability, your ability to step in no matter what the industry, and within moments pick up and really produce and really, perform. That could be something that's really unique or a distinguishing feature as well. What you're known for. This is an actual question I will ask my clients when I'm working with them. What are you known for? Usually, that's where you are particularly strong. And if, again, that is a distinguishing feature, something that's going to make you stand above and beyond everyone else, highlight that. And then obviously, and this goes to that match between what they want and what you have, the expertise and value that your target market is buying. What's most important to them. So I'm going to show you some samples, and they're totally different, but some samples of what this summary section, or profile as I call it, at the top of a resume could look like. Whoops, I went too fast. So here's one. So this is Martin's. Now here's an interesting little thing. You can put your name over to the side and so forth. Sometimes I center it. It really doesn't matter. But here's the thing. You'll notice that I want your eyes to go to investment management. That's what I call the headline. So the headline could be a job title, could be just an area, could be just a general kind of a function. And then underneath it, I kind of qualify it with 4 or 5 key areas of expertise that he's strong in. So the whole idea is, in a matter of seconds, someone can find this. And even if they're using one of those applicant tracking systems or ATS systems, on the recruiting side, on the company side, it will also pick up these terms. So investment management, fund management, fundamental research, option equity and fixed income trading, stock, like in a matter of seconds, without that headline, I would have to read, literally read, or go looking for that level of expertise. So we're talking about this section right here, highlighted in red. That's what I call this the profile. And then underneath it, 5 simple bullet points that sort of get to the point. And then in this particular case, he's getting an MBA at the University of Utah, also has a bachelor's degree in business management. So 5 little quick blurbs, and that's a great intro. It's quick, it's fast, it's concise, it's to the point, and it really kind of sells what Martin brings to the table. So that's one way of doing it. Here's a totally different way of doing it. A little bit more elaborate, I guess. It's a little bit bigger. Same idea, senior IT project manager, then what I call sort of a byline under it, 15 years experience, distributed and mainframe systems, infrastructure, applications development, and integration. So those are the areas that Vikram specializes in. Then it could be a little brief, and this is about as long as you would ever want a paragraph in a resume. 3-4 lines maximum. 15 years experience directing complex technology engagements in commercial, banking, and insurance sectors. Skilled at overseeing and driving projects throughout the entire life cycle, from project planning and charters through management of budgets, resources. It's not generic, it's right to the point. And then in terms of project management, then we kind of break the bullets down and categorize them with a title. Project management, team management, communications, and technology highlights. It's not his entire technology inventory, but it's the highlights, the ones that are most likely or most relevant to his target audience. And even under that, I have a whole other section called areas of expertise, where again, we get more keywords and skills in there. So you can get the idea, you know, even under project team leadership, hired and performance managed 27-person teams known as the Get It Done coach who does this. It's very specific. It's not generic. Here's another one. And it's again, a little more comprehensive, but we built it around the whole idea of, again, that headline, strategic executive, healthcare, strategy development, business development, growth and turnaround, gave them the same name. These are fictional. By the way, these are real resumes that I've written that worked for clients. I just changed some of the personal details. Innovative strategist and growth architect, and then a blurb. Fearless tactician, and then a blurb. And that was a phrase he used when I was working with him. So if there's a way, a phrase you can coin, you don't have to sound generic. Actually use the phrase. 10 years of healthcare experience, a lean operations champion, and a motivating leader. And then again, a little keyword table underneath it that are hard skills. Again, a totally different way of doing it. But again, really presents this person who Vikram is right up front. This is literally just the first third, about a third of the top of the first page. That's all it is. And then the experience section goes underneath it. So I've only just cut these off at the top. This is just the top of the page. And if you really want to go crazy, you could do something like this. You know, again, IBM Enterprise Sales Executive, same idea, little introductory sentence, a few bullet points that I categorize. I personally like this style. You'll see it a lot in my resumes. The reason is it works. But then I decided to highlight, I mean, this guy has got so many awards under him. Received 1 performance rating for 20 consecutive years. Exceeded targets for 21 straight years, from 103% to as much as over 1,000%. 14 consecutive Achievers Club MVP. I mean, you can get it. Sales Eminence and Step Up Awards for North America. And I even put a table in there that showed the kind of numbers above target that he is typically known for. That shows you what you can do. Again, I'm not saying this is a template. I'm not saying yours has to look like this, but it shows you what you can do with this section. We want this section to really leap out and pop and really market what you bring to the table, where you're particularly strong. From the profile, in that, there's that headline. So in this one, it's IBM Sales Executive. You saw in the previous ones. I like to put them between a couple lines or kind of sort of just by formatting, highlight them in some way. Here's what you could do. Here's 3 completely different ways of doing it. It could say something like this: Senior Human Resources Manager, CHRP, 15+ years of Fortune 500 experience. That is a great headline. All of a sudden, if I'm, for example, looking for someone who is an HR manager, who's at a senior level, obviously has their CHRP and has worked for companies like mine, if I'm Fortune 500 or large like that, in 2 lines, this person has almost qualified themselves in a lot of ways. Or it could be this, you could do 3 lines. Global Marketing Director, specialist in international business development, Americas, Europe, Asia, or it could be healthcare sales executive, 14 President's Club Awards, executive MBA. You could make it whatever you want to. I like the idea of a bolded headline in big letters, and then maybe a little smaller under it, some sort of other byline. You saw in previous samples, I had specific, like that investment manager. I had like 4 or 5 areas of expertise, or it could just be something like this. What you want is to kind of qualify this as best you can. So if with this were a workshop, I would have you write your headline right now, or what your headline could be. So this is going to really help you, again, draw attention to it. You really want this headline to be the first thing someone sees, right in the visual center of the page. Honestly, I don't mind. I very often do resumes where the name is not bolded. It's the same size font. It's over in the corner. I would be willing to bet that most of you have a resume where your name is the biggest, boldest font and text on the page. If they're looking at the visual center of the page, your name, believe it or not, is entirely missed. And it is actually one of the most irrelevant pieces of information on the page until they want to call you. So you don't need to highlight your name. My name is Ross. No one cares. At the resume stage of the game, it's something else they're looking for. So highlight what they're looking for. That's where you want their eyes to go. If you are changing careers, here's what you do with this top section, okay? You have to qualify yourself into the new target role. If you, let's say, for example, again, you are an IT project manager and you're trying to move into marketing. I'll just pull that out of a hat. Or I'll give you a specific example. I had a client who was an admissions director at a private school. She was in charge of admissions. She wanted to get into pharmaceutical and bioscience marketing. That's a bit of a switch. She had done a bit of marketing to attract people to this private school where she was admissions director. So we highlighted that. If she went all into her just general career, she'd be selling herself as an admissions director of a private school. That makes no sense if she's trying to change careers. You've got to focus yourself. What I call the phrase is, you want your resume at this stage to be aspirational. You want to position your resume for where you're trying to go. So you need to qualify yourself into this new target role. Put everything that you have that's relevant to that new career, that new target, put it all. Highlight, make it what I call top heavy. Make that resume top heavy at the top. Really like overwhelm them with everything you have that's relevant from your previous or current career into that new career. Okay, you've really got to sell it. You obviously can't say, I've got 10 years, that admissions director can't say, I've got X number of years experience doing pharmaceutical and bioscience marketing. Can't make that claim. But what she could do is say, here's what I can do. And then follow it with all sorts of marketing terminology that gets more marketing content, more relevant content in there. You want to obviously, throughout the resume, reduce any less relevant details. So for example, again, you're in IT, I see this all the time, someone from a very technical field like IT, and you just left all of your really hardcore, deep technical content in there, and you're trying to go into a non-technical role. There's a disconnect there. So you might want to soften some of the overly technical stuff and less relevant stuff and highlight the more relevant stuff. That just makes sense. You might even want to consider a one-page resume. So in other words, you're taking out a lot of the heavy, detail from your current or previous career and opting to make it a much neater, more focused kind of resume that's only one page, but you're going for relevance over, for impact over volume. And that might be a better way to do that. And the other thing, these are magical words that every really good, decent resume writer who knows his or her stuff will use. You, again, can't say you've got 10 years experience doing it, but you can say, I'm ideally suited to, and then follow it with all sorts of relevant content for where you're going. Ideally suited to do marketing in this type, this, and this, or able to do this, and this. And you're positioning yourself for where you're trying to go. So let me show you what that might look like. Here's an example. I changed his name, but this was an actual person that I worked with a number of years ago who was in chemistry. He was actually an applications chemist, and he had been trying to get his MBA because he wanted to move into the management, the business side of things. He was tired of working in a lab. He wanted to work in more management. But every time he tried, his resume said, I'm a chemist. I'm an applications chemist. Everything in his resume said chemist. Someone said, go get your MBA. So he went to get his MBA. And all he did was add MBA to his education at the bottom of his resume. It still said chemist all the way through it. And then way at the bottom, it said MBA, but that wasn't enough. So I worked with him and we built a whole profile that positioned him for where he was going. So we put it down as chemistry management. And we wanted to say, I've got a BS in chemistry, 10 years of lab experience, and an MBA in general management. And then we said, you know, senior chemistry professional combining 10 years of technical experience with an MBA in general management. There's that magical phrase, ideally suited to management roles requiring balanced strength in both technical and business. And then we said able to, and he used the phrase he wanted to be the Rosetta Stone, the person who understands technical and understands business and can translate the two between the two. And he even said at his company, the technical people speak technical and the business people speak business. There's no one in the middle. So I said, well, where could you fit in? I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. So able to communicate between technical and business teams, align operations to strategic objectives, manage and optimize efficiencies, improve collaboration and flow of data between departments, serve as the conduit between the development of a product, the chemistry side of it, and the commercialization of that product, the business side of it. So he saw himself as the middle person. And then we added some management expertise, some lab expertise, and he went from trying to get an interview for about 3 years to getting a job offer within about 6 weeks, simply because he framed this for where he wants to go and said something like, I'm able to do this for you, this for you, this for you. He's not talking in generalities. He knew where he fit in and he knew where his value was. And that's what he sold, and people understood it. So that's what you can do if you're trying to make a bit of a career switch. Really position yourself and make a case for where you're trying to go. Here was another one. And in terms of a headline, you could do this. I'm not a fan of those objective statements, you know, those statements that say objective, seeking a high-paying role or a dynamic role in a fast-paced company that offers opportunities for growth and advancement. Those are useless. Just say this: goal, marketing strategist or consultant. And then, again, build a case. And you'll notice I even put in a quote. And if you've got a great quote, really tight soundbite, as I call it, if you're able to work with Jason, I urge you to do so. Like me, you will count yourself fortunate to have had that opportunity, or something great like that. Again, positioned himself for where he's trying to go. That's the whole idea behind this. And then again, he had some marketing experience, which we were able to highlight in this top section. He didn't have years and years of experience as a professional doing it, but he had some here and there. And we, again, remember I said, put everything you can in there. So that's what you can do for a career switch. Some other things, now we're going to jump down to, remember I said I'm going 100 miles an hour. We were only halfway down, or a third of the way down page 1 right now. The next section is the experience section. And first off, please do not write down responsible for. Those are 2 of the most boring words you can possibly put in a resume. I want you to find a way to write it so that it's more what you did versus what you were supposed to do. So this is where accomplishments come in. And we're all familiar with the idea of writing accomplishments, but what you may not be familiar with is there's actually 3 completely different types of accomplishments. And some of them are incredibly powerful. The first one is the one we all know, the result or benefit. And the result or benefit is, I did this and this was the result. Or here's what I improved by doing this. So something like this: increased revenues 47% over the previous year by rationalizing the customer base and focusing efforts on tier 1 accounts. Great idea. And I personally prefer to put the result first, because people read left to right. Why not open with a really strong, with the result? And if you've got great numbers in there, and not every job has numbers, that's okay. But if you do have the kind of role that's evaluated by numbers, by percentages, revenue, increase, decrease, whatever it happens to be, those really pop off the page. But let's say, for example, you are in an area or in a job, or you even have achievements or accomplishments that aren't measurable. That's totally okay. Here's one: championed a culture shift across the division, improving collaboration and creating work environments that encouraged ownership and rewarded achievement. Again, I did this, and this was the benefit. This was the result. And don't think that these aren't considered very important. That line, that second one, is from a senior executive out in Silicon Valley. And she is in charge of the entire finance division of a Fortune 50 technology company. And she runs their global finance. her numbers were ridiculous. Like, she was saving money in the billions. She had incredible results, but this was the one she was most proud of, because she said, I never would have been able to do any of those other great things had I not changed the entire culture of the organization. So these can carry an awful lot of weight. That's the result or benefit. And I'm assuming most of you had this. You made something better by doing this, and here's how much I made it better, or how I made it better. The second type is maybe there's no result tied to it, but it's the sheer scope or complexity of what you did that is something you want to highlight. So could be this: led operations for a national division with over 30,000 employees across 800 chapter sites, both domestic and international. So we're not talking about a result yet, but we are trying to showcase the sheer size or scope or complexity of it. Another one I often see with project managers is you'll list your projects, but you very often don't go to the trouble of saying that 5 of them were concurrent. Well, project managed up to 20 concurrent development projects with full accountability for blah, blah, blah. It's the complexity that you're trying to showcase. You're not talking about a specific achievement or I should say result yet, or you may not even have one, but you can showcase the complexity or size of it. Now, the last one, the third type, my personal favorite, and I'm always asking my clients about this. The third one is what I call the before and after. So my question I'm going to ask you is, how many of you have ever started a job, and when you started the job, things were a disaster, it was awful, and you turned it around? Well, why not come up with one phrase, one line that you can add in there that is the before and after? Basically, started with this and turned it into that. Those are incredibly powerful. So it could be, and you use great words like transformed an underperforming back office operation into the #1 service leader with 24-hour turnaround and award-winning service reviews. So I started with something that was underperforming, not working, and I turned it into the #1 leader. That's a great line. It put it all in one statement. Successfully salvaged a $15 million project, played with delays and cost overruns, did this, and did this. So really consider, if you've got a before and after, try to find a great way to do it. So let me show you how you can then put these great accomplishments you're going to write into your actual resume. And I'll show you a couple other little advanced tips and tricks. So here's one. This is the top of page 2. So you'll see, I called him Benedict Cumberbatch because I love that name. But you'll see that's just sort of the heading at the top, the header at the top for the second page. But under United Tire Corporation, I usually like to start with sort of a contextual kind of blurb. So here's what I basically did in the role. And built and managed a 10-person team. If you've managed teams, tell me how many you managed. If you controlled budgets, tell me how big the budget was. People like to know that kind of detail. And this is a great place for that. Then you get into the bullet points. Created the company's sustainability program, including blah, 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 secured the company's first with 0 material weaknesses for deficiencies in internal controls, collaborated with both internal and external partners to introduce a more refined methodology, resulting in a full 50% reduction in finance reporting controls. So you'll notice I do all of this through there, and the same thing underneath it. You can underline a little piece of the sentence of a bullet point. Just don't underline or highlight the whole thing, and don't make it so overwhelming that it's actually visually an assault, but you can do that kind of thing. Let me show you a totally different way of doing it. Here's that admissions director. So I just pulled a little piece of her experience section. So you see ABC, Secondary Heights, private, admissions director, created and executed the strategies that increased enrollment from an all-time low to 27% growth within 2 years, set an aggressive new strategy, defined the market, and introduced dynamic new events and collateral. Now, she was trying to move from admissions director into biopharmaceutical marketing. So there's no point in going into exhaustive detail about admissions here, but I can talk about the marketing that she did. So, and I even put a heading, kind of categorized each bullet: communication strategy, print and online marketing, alumni and community outreach, promotional events. Same thing when she was a marketing coordinator earlier on her career, social media strategy. You see the idea. That's what we're trying to do, is create really concise bullet points that are as relevant as possible. Now, if you really want to go crazy, you can do something like this. ABC Educational Services, maybe a little blurb about the company underneath it, then the title, and then I jump right into a before and after, right into what is the larger achievement in your whole tenure in that role. So he was 4 years in this role, turned around this $2 million revenue business, reversed 2 consecutive years of losses, personally sold this much in new business, generated 18% net profit, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with LMNOP properties underneath it, rebuilt the in-house marketing engine. So I open with a bolded and highlighted before and after kind of statement. And then the bullets underneath it are, here's how I did it. And it's really concise, to the point, and it's got impact. So there's all sorts of things. So again, you could do something like this. I'm not saying you have to, and maybe a lot of you, it won't be quite right for you, but it shows you what you can do. Now, in terms of the number of bullets, I do want to sort of give a little bit of a clarification on that. I would say the majority you want to go for is in the 5 to 7 range, maximum. I have seen my personal record. You can't see it here, but I've got it on a whiteboard. I have the number 36 circled, because that's the most bullet points I ever saw one single person put under one job. 36. That's insane. You really want to be as concise as possible, so try to find your best. If you held a job, and I've had like presidents of a company, CEOs of a company that held a role for 15 plus years, and they've got an unbelievable inventory of achievement in there. Well, if you really just can't sum it down to 5 to 7, you've got 12. Okay, here's my recommendation. Break them into smaller categories. So revenue improvement, put 3 under there. HR and staffing, put 3 under there. Operations and streamlining and cost control, put 4 under there. And you can sort of build it, make up your 12 there. Then it looks like 3 sections of 4 or 4 sections of 3, as opposed to one giant section of 12, which no one wants to read. So there's little tricks you can do in this section, but I'm a big fan of making this section as concise and direct as possible. And wherever you can showcase the result of the great work you did, that's what we really want to kind of highlight. So I do want to quickly run through. So those are some best practices for the most difficult, but also the most important sections of your resume. Getting past ATS systems. Those are those applicant tracking systems. What they are going to do is you're going to submit your resume. It's going to go into basically this system, which is essentially a database with kind of some fancy tools behind it. And it's going to, the recruiter or hiring manager, personnel and talent acquisition end, is going to say, okay, I'm hiring for job X. These are the things I'm looking for. And they enter it into the system. And the system then evaluates and looks for that in the resumes that are submitted. You want your resume to, one, have those kind of things. That's why I said what they're looking for that you have, really highlight those. But the other thing is there's certain things you want to do to your resume and certain things you do not want to do to your resume to make certain it gets through these ATS systems. So stands for Applicant Tracking Software. Please assume there used to be only the big companies could afford them, but now they've got really small, really compact sort of, cloud-based systems that even smaller companies can afford. So assume every company is using them. Here are some tips. If there are certain phrases, skill sets, or whatever from the posting that you see, if you've got that, and I'm emphasizing if you have it, then integrate it where you can. They usually look in the experience section first. They also usually look on page 1 first. It weights differently. So something on page 1 in your experience section is going to be weighted heavier than something at the bottom of page 2. So you want to make certain if you've got it in there, you want to kind of highlight that. As I said, page 1's most important. Don't feel like you have to copy entire text from the posting. Synonyms work. These are advanced systems with a lot of AI behind them, artificial intelligence. So synonyms work. Even the more intuitive AI-based systems now understand similar concepts. So you're applying for project manager. They're looking for project management or as a skill set, for example. But you have, directed, major enterprise initiatives. It understands that those are essentially talking about the same idea. So they're intuitive. They understand similar concepts. So just make certain you're getting it in there. Formatting wise, they cannot read anything in headers. I've seen people who put their name and contact information in a header. Please don't do that because it's invisible to these ATS systems. So don't put anything important in a header or a footer, and also a text box. Now you can put a frame around something and it'll see it. You can put a border around something and it'll see it. But if you literally format something as a text box, it will not see it. And it also gets messed up with columns. These systems are trained to read left to right, from one side of the page to the other. So it doesn't understand with columns that I'm going down one side and then going down the other. it'll read straight across 2 columns, and all of a sudden your brilliantly written resume is now like unintelligible garbage. It doesn't read it at all because it's reading across 2 columns line by line. So you want to make certain you're trying to use columns are actually a bad thing for these things. We're down to the last few minutes. Some final resume tips. Other sections you could include, and again, I had to highlight those most important sections. You could have a whole section on awards if you've got them. If you have volunteer experience, create a whole section for it. If it's relevant volunteer experience, really highlight it. Go into some detail. Don't just list it. Actually go into detail. Some personal, I'll spend about 30 seconds on this one. Many people will put hobbies and interests down on a resume. More often than not, I'm not a fan. I know some people like it. I'm personally not a fan because if you simply say hobbies and interests and say, I enjoy, playing Frisbee and walking my dog, I don't think anyone's learned anything about you that they can use in any way. Personal achievements, however, are a whole other thing. So if you, like for example, it's one thing to say, enjoy running. Okay, from what? I don't know why I'm impressed with that. But if you ran marathons, that's a whole other thing. That requires a dedication, a commitment, a focus, a training. I can intuit things from that. I can assume certain things about you from that. I had a client who once told me that, she enjoyed trekking. Okay, I didn't know what that meant, T-R-E-K. Trekking, I don't know, walking, hiking, that was based. And I said, what exactly is that? She said, it's sort of extreme hiking. And she said, my husband and I go on a trek every single year. That's our holiday. And she said, we've done Mount Kilimanjaro, we've done the Grand Canyon. 2 years ago, we trekked up to the base camp of Mount Everest. And I stopped her and went, wait a second. You've trekked to the base camp of Mount Everest and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and your resume says enjoy trekking? My version of her resume mentioned things like Mount Everest and Mount Kilimanjaro. So if it's more of an achievement, that can say a lot about you, as opposed to just listing something. And please, if it is walking my dog, reading, and don't. Everybody walks, everybody reads. You're not saying anything important, so I'd rather you just left it off. If you've got something important or interesting or relevant to say here, then you can add personal interest. Otherwise, don't bother. I don't think it's adding a lot. Fill in that space with something from your experience section. Be consistent with the formatting. If your headings are bolded, Arial, 14 point, make them all that. Use ample white space everywhere. I add additional space between bullets. You can go into formatting and add a little bit of space before or after a line. I do it all the time. I want it to make certain it's readable. You can, as you saw, highlight some text for, to make it really kind of pop off the page. Like you could bold something, underline it maybe. Don't overly italicize things. It can actually be hard to read sometimes, depending on the font you're using. But just don't overdo those. Really make certain it's readable, because I've seen some that are so highlighted and there's so much going on, it's actually a bit of an assault. Keep everything tight, in other words, concise, to the point, and relevant. Those days, and many of you may have heard these phrases of, resume stuffers and that sort of content. Don't. Today's technology and so forth, you're not impressing anybody. Make it as concise and to the point as you possibly can. That's what's going to open doors. The content is going to be what's going to open the door. Stick to standard fonts. There are obviously innumerable fonts out there. Remember that not everyone has those fonts if you're sending a Word version. Yes, some systems will accept a PDF, but just don't go silly with the fonts. No script, no Comic Sans, no nonsense. I'll be honest with you, I keep it to pretty much Arial and Times Roman. And if it's Friday afternoon and I'm in kind of a crazy nutty mood, I may go Arial narrow, and that's about it. I mean, it really, make them the readable standard fonts. You don't need anything fancy. And I said this at the very beginning, and I'll repeat it now. Microsoft Word has resume templates. Don't use them, please. I'm begging you. One, they don't work for you. I don't believe any one of you can fit into a template. If you buy into what I've been saying, you want to customize and build your resume, there's no template out there for you. The other thing is a lot of the recruiters instantly recognize a Word template, and it instantly tells them, I put no work into this. So don't use templates. So that's essentially it. I'll leave it here, but that's the 49-minute version of advanced resumes. Any questions come through?
We do have a few.
Yeah.
So I'll start with cover pages. What are your thoughts and advice on cover pages?
Okay, first and foremost, some of you out there are saying, do I even need one? And the answer is, unless they say don't bother, it never hurts to send one. However, understand that not everyone will read it. So my first recommendation is, I've heard people say, I'm going to put a generic resume together and customize the cover letter. If only maybe a quarter of the people out there are even bothering to read your cover letter, then you just lost an opportunity and all they're going to see is your generic resume. So send a cover letter, but make the cover letter and the resume both phenomenal. In terms of how to put together a really good cover letter, really concise. I mean, I make mine really concise and I break them into 3 sections. An opening that gets to the point. Please don't open with "Dear so-and-so, in response to the posting I saw, I am here with enclosing my," like people fall into a coma in the first line. You want to start off with "Dear so-and-so, I am a senior IT project manager with 15 years experience working in this, and this. I saw your posting for a program manager and, blah, blah, blah. So open with something strong, then skip a line. And then you can get into, and then I usually put a bulleted section in here. It could say a little bit of a blurb and then here's what I offer, or I've even just jumped right into here's what I can bring to the role, colon, and then qualification, really concise, skip a line and maybe put 4 or 5 of their absolute most relevant. And then the last one is sort of a call to action. Above all, I work hard. I can't wait to bring my energy, passion, and qualifications to this role. Please contact me at this number. Sincerely, your name. It's concise, to the point, and it's answering their question. Is this a candidate worth looking at? That's all you need for a cover letter. And then your resume is going to be just as strong, if not stronger.
Thank you. We have a question about previous experience.
Yeah.
Would you include experience that, say, is older than 10 years, or would you include everything? What are your thoughts?
Okay. So in the experience section, for example, good question. In the experience section, what I usually do, you can weight the jobs you've had for how relevant they are. So there may be a job that's incredibly relevant that you put, 6 bullet points down and you really weight that one heavy on the resume because it's incredibly relevant. You may have held a role, for example, and usually the earlier roles in your career fall in this category, where it may be just a matter of mentioning it, maybe putting a little blurb, 1 line or something, or 2 lines under it. But how far you go back is usually what I usually say is as far as is necessary, as far as is relevant. I have heard recruiters say, I'm not interested in anything prior to 10 years. But I've also heard some executive recruiters who want to see that. Generally speaking, what I'll do is I'll go back on average, depending on the person and how many roles there have been and where we are on the resume and how relevant it is. But I may go back 10 to 15 years, maybe. And then beyond that, if there are roles that I want to mention, I'll literally just put in the center of the page at the bottom of the experience section, previous roles include, senior IT roles with IBM and Hewlett Packard. And that's all I say. I'm basically saying, yes, there's previous experience, but I'm not giving you the detail. There's no point because it was back in 1998 or something like that. So you don't need to go into that detail that far back.
Thank you. I have some new grads and they have questions. If they don't have much experience, professional experience, how would you structure the resume? Do you have any tips?
Perfect. If you are a recent grad, I would say build a really strong profile. I still want to know what you can do. So if you have a target in mind, remember, build that profile section. And yours, as a new grad, you don't need that first third of the page. You may only have a little one, but that's okay. Make it as targeted and as impactful as possible. Let me really know what you're good at. And you could even include that able to or ideally suited to phrase in there and position yourself for where you're trying to go. Then, unless you have really good work and relevant work experience, like co-op experience of some kind, or some sort of a relevant work experience related to where you're trying to go, you're probably gonna, in which case you could start off with your experience section right under the profile. Chances are for new grads, you're gonna jump right into your education right under that. But by all means, go into some detail with your education. If you got any scholarships, any academic awards, any, organizations or clubs you belong to, any extracurriculars that say a little something about you. And you can even, if you want to, I've had education sections that have a chunk of information. If you wrote any papers, worked on any projects, led any projects that are relatable to where you're trying to go, that are relevant, highlight that. So anything at all that's relevant, you can expand on your education section, and then depending on how much is relevant, provide as much detail about your experience as possible. But even if you were a barista at Starbucks and that's your job, or you making sandwiches at Subway, it doesn't matter. If you can really showcase how well you did your job, where you made suggestions that made things better, how you were able to handle pressure, whatever it happens to be, how you handle volume, maybe you supervised, a staff, maybe you were given additional responsibility or accountability for something. Because even if you don't have a ton of work experience, I still, as an employer, I want to know what you can do for me. I want to be impressed that you know where you're going to fit in and what you can do for me. And I also want to know that you, just on paper, you're a good worker. You're someone who can handle responsibility, handle stress, any number of things. So still a lot of the theories and a lot of the strategies and advice I've given, no, you're not running a company. That's totally fine. But in the responsibility that you did have, where did you really shine? What can you say about yourself? Because I want to still be impressed. Whether it doesn't matter whether you're the president of the company or whether you're in the entry-level role, I still want to know there's still measurement of what a good job is. And that's what we're still trying to measure. And very often it's, thinking about what would my boss say about me, or what have my performance evaluations said? Take a look at all of that stuff and you can find something that's going to work for you. But ultimately, you're probably, as a recent grad, going to be a one-pager, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you have enough for a two-page, great. But if you're a one-pager, make it a really strong one-pager. You can still really sell yourself into a role.
All right. Thank you. That's time. Thank you for taking the time to learn with us today. Thank you, Ross. You presented a lot of useful content, and we thank you too for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay healthy.
Please do. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.